Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're talking about numbers 17, 18, and 19 on the big board and players that very likely will be on the board when the Wolves are drafting at 19, who I would take if I were the Wolves and these players were on the board. There's a lot of depth to this draft, and we're going to get into it here today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Today, we're talking all things NBA draft. Again, we get to number 19 on my big board, which, of course, is where the Timberwolves are drafting. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms from Google to Apple, Spotify, Odyssey. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. The Locked On NBA mock draft, the ultimate mock draft, is out. It started on Thursday. Our episode's going to air next week, I think Monday or Tuesday of next week, which will be pick 19. You'll find out who I selected in that mock. Then, of course, we'll have live draft coverage next Thursday through Locked On NBA, and yours truly and all of the other Locked On hosts will be live following each team's pick on that show. And we'll also do a live show following the draft next Thursday too, so be sure to tune in for that. All right, today we're going to talk 17, 18, and 19 on my Timberwolves big board. I'll quickly run through who I have as my top, I guess to this point through, through 16. So number one on my big board, and a reminder, this is from the perspective of the Timberwolves. If I'm the Wolves, these are the players I would draft in this order if I were at each of these selections and these players were on the board. So this won't look the same as most mock drafts. This certainly won't look the same as most big boards. There's going to be some names that are missing, maybe not so conspicuously. If you've listened to previous shows, I explained kind of why. Like, I'm not picking center. Like, I know Mark Williams is going to go like top 15. I haven't gotten to him on my big board, and I'm not going to get to him today either because, yeah, he's a really good center, but Towns loses some value if you play him at the 4 all the time. And I don't think that's sustainable to play Towns with a true 5 all the time. And it's not the best use of assets. Yeah, he'd be a great backup center, but drafting Mark Williams or trading up to draft Mark Williams makes no sense given the Wolves roster and their other assets. So anyway, here's the big board in order based on what I think the Wolves, what I would do if I were the Wolves. I have Jabari Smith first. I have Chet Holmgren, of course, the Minnesota native out of Gonzaga, second. Paolo Banchero is third. I have Keegan Murray out of Iowa fourth. Shaedon Sharpe is fifth. Jaden Ivey from Purdue is sixth. I have Benedict Mathurin 7. AJ Griffin of Duke 8. Jeremy Sohan from Baylor 9. I have Ochai Agbaji from Kansas 10, Malachi Branham 11, Dyson Daniels 12, Tari Eason 12, Dyson Daniels 13, Johnny Davis from Wisconsin 14th, Jalen Duren is 15, Ousmane Dieng is 16. Now today we're talking 17, 18, 19. I'll tell you what, I really like all three of these players, and honestly, when I shuffle my big board, I'm going to do one more shuffle of this before the draft next Thursday and just kind of do some highlights and some reasoning as to why I've shuffled it a little bit. There's some upside in guys like Duren and Dieng, and Johnny Davis is a solid guard, but like getting into this, these guys fit the Wolves. The next three guys I'm going to talk about positionally so well with some reasonable upside that they could rise at my board. And also a reminder, all these guys are likely, or I should say all of them, it's actually pretty likely all three of these guys are on the board at 19. Remember, this is a Wolves big board. So there's guys I haven't gotten to that are above these players on most mock drafts that likely will be selected, which means these guys would be pushed down. So now we're into the range of guys that very legitimately should be on the board when the Timberwolves draft, and this is how I would rank them. So 17 on my big board is E.J. Liddell from, not Oklahoma State, Ohio State. He is a combo forward, essentially, can guard multiple wing spots. He's 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan. He's a senior, so he's 22, so he's a little bit of an older pick, which is the main reason, actually, why he slides. I mean, he doesn't get his own shot. He doesn't create for himself. He doesn't put the ball on the floor and score successfully, which is the biggest red flag. But it's also really the only one. He could guard multiple wing spots, be disruptive defensively with his length. He's a very good spot-up shooter. He's 37.5% from three. The form isn't perfect. It's a little bit slow. There's a hitch in his shot. I don't think that really matters as long as he doesn't get it blocked, and with his length, he shouldn't. As long as he can speed up his release a little. If he knocks down 38% from three, that's the role he's going to fill. What I really like about him, and I've talked about this before related to, yes, I know the Wolves need physicality, rebounding, rim protection. EJ Liddell can bring the shot blocking from a non-center spot, really a non-big spot. He's probably best cast as a three who can guard fours. Maybe he could play some small ball five. I mean, if the Wolves really get into playing some small ball moving forward, and they might, he could play some small ball five, but he's going to be a three or a four and be a really good shot blocker, be switchable, still be able to guard on the perimeter, but get recovery blocks, chase down blocks in the open floor, recover if he's beaten off the dribble, and help side blocks as well. Just a good shot blocker and a solid rim protector. The Wolves need to get rebounding and rim protection from non-center positions. Those are areas Towns can be a good rebounder, but in the Wolves' defensive scheme, he's often going to be near the perimeter. They need another plus rebounder. They need somebody else that can block shots. Towns is not a traditional rim protector. He's fine blocking shots, but that's always going to be an area that he's not a super mobile, switchable, athletic shot blocking freak at center. He just isn't. So you have to find some of that elsewhere. It's one of the reasons why Jaden McDaniels is such a great fit, because he can bring the perimeter defense shot blocking element that Towns doesn't. Now, of course, he's not as good of a rebounder, which is probably his biggest issue. But EJ Liddell could bring that shot blocking element from a non-big role, at least a non-center role. He's a very intelligent player. His rotations defensively are very strong. Solid half-court passer. He's not an initiator, which is fine. The Wolves don't need an initiator, and the next two guys I'm going to talk about today are. They're guys who can initiate offense and do initiate offense. But Liddell's very comfortable playing off the ball. He just makes the right passes. He hits cutters. He can be the guy who's a pass away and can then swing the ball. And so the high basketball intelligence is very clear on both ends of the floor. From the defensive rotation standpoint, making the extra pass on offense, he can be a cutter himself. Again, the only real concern is he's not going to create for himself. He's not going to create off the dribble. The face-up game probably does need some work if we're talking about a guy who's going to play the four at the NBA level. You'd like him to be able to score off the dribble a little bit. But those are also concerns of Jaden McDaniels. He doesn't have the athleticism of a McDaniels. But there's plenty of room. Like Jared Vanderbilt doesn't create off the dribble either, right? He also can't shoot, and Liddell can. So for me, with the Wolves, if you're talking about a team that has Karl-Anthony Towns and obviously has Anthony Edwards and other guys that are very comfortable scoring off the dribble and carrying the offensive load, you're talking about a smart spot-up shooter that's going to make the right pass and be really good defensively, add a shot blocking element. I don't care that he's 22. The Wolves need a plug-and-play guy. If they think they're a playoff team, and they are, if they think they're a 4 or 5 seed next year, then this guy fits. EJ Liddell is a fantastic fit, and I would look at him. He's another guy I'd look at, and I don't know that you trade up for him necessarily, but if he's there at 19, you take him. If you need to move up a spot or two, you're worried about somebody right in front of you taking him, I think you look at giving up an asset to do that, because he can immediately step in and fit into that 3-4 mix with McDaniels, maybe the 4-5 mix with Vanderbilt, and be part of the rotation from day one because of his experience and his relative polish to his game at this point. All right, 2 more players to talk about here today. First, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, which are now underway. Of course, the NBA Finals, haven't even mentioned those yet, just completed with the Warriors winning their 4th title in 8 years, and good for them. You could bet on any of the other sports, though, at BetOnline, including Stanley Cup Finals and, of course, MLB, the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC, boxing, whatever sport you want. We're not that far from football. We're, 2 months away from preseason football. You can bet on preseason football there, too, if you want to. NFL and college football gets underway not long after that. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. I do have an important ask for you, a favor to ask of you, the listener. We put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like yourself and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards to take our audience survey. Go to Locked On Podcast. That's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you in advance for your help. All right. Next up on the big board for me, number 18, Jalen Williams from Santa Clara. He's a fascinating prospect to me. And if you haven't watched Miss Jalen Williams, if you haven't watched his games or any of his highlights, go find a highlight video on YouTube. He's a ton of fun. He's 6'5", but he has a 7'2" wingspan. And if at first glance, his build looks a lot like Jaden McDaniels. And their games aren't the same, but the build looks a lot like McDaniels. A little shorter, certainly. I mean, Jaden McDaniels is now He's like 6'10" at this point. He keeps growing. But Jalen Williams with the 7'2" wingspan, just super lanky. He's a ball handler creator type guy, right? Jaden McDaniels isn't that guy. I mean, he's hopefully becoming more comfortable with the ball in his hands, but he's a different player. He's more of a guard wing than he is a wing forward. He's not going to be a point guard necessarily, but he's a great secondary playmaker. And he was the offense. He was the creator. He played at Santa Clara, right? So mid first round guy at Santa Clara is going to be somebody who had the ball in his hands a lot in college. He's fantastic in the pick and roll, which again, isn't like, I mean, when Ryan Saunders was the coach, that was like 85% of what the Wolves did. Maybe exaggerating a little, but not a lot. It's not the staple of the Wolves offense anymore under Chris Finch, but it's part of it, especially when currently D'Angelo Russell is your lead guard, and Karl-Anthony Towns is so good in pick and roll game, and Anthony Edwards getting downhill. Dribble handoff action is essentially a version of pick and roll, and Ant is fantastic in dribble handoff action. That's all stuff that Jalen Williams should be able to do at the NBA level. He's also very dangerous when he gets downhill with his mid-range game, his floater. He can also get all the way to the rim and draw contact despite his build, and maybe this is, I guess, a little bit of a concern headed to the NBA because he is so slight and he's only 6'5", doesn't have much strength to his build, not much thickness. Can he withstand that, getting pounded in the paint if he's driving the ball to the basket consistently? But if he doesn't, the mid-range game and floater is kind of like on par with a D'Lo type game, but D'Lo doesn't get to the rim and Jalen Williams does. And as long as he can continue to finish their contact at the NBA level, he can score at all three levels because of that. And I mean, there's not very many guys with a 7'2" wingspan and a good first step that can score at all three levels. He can do that. Also, he was 48% on catch and shoot 3-point opportunities this year in the half court. He was inconsistent over his 3 years at Santa Clara. I mean, you go back and look, he's coming out after his junior year. As a sophomore, he shot just 27.4% from three, but he was 35% as a freshman. So over the course of the 3 seasons, he was 35% from three because the volume was so low early in his career when he was 35%. He was not a good shooter last year, but this year he was just a shade under 40% overall. And again, he was 39.6% overall. He was 48% on catch and shoot, so not nearly as good off the bounce. But the form is good enough. I mean, there's some tweaking to do there, I think, but clearly he's got touch. He's scoring with the floater game, the mid-range, has touch around the basket, some creativity there. And I think the volume and also the fact that he got better as he went as a junior in his final year at Santa Clara is super encouraging. Defensively, he can guard point guards, he can guard wings. His length disrupts pick and roll. It really disrupts dribble handoff actions. I mean, he can just, without getting himself in harm's way in terms of foul trouble, he can just put his hand in there, deflect a pass, deflect a handoff. I mean, he did a lot of that. Pokes the ball away as a help defender. He's really fantastic off the ball. He's good at digging in the post, just kind of flying by and just getting a deflection, digging on post offensive players, getting deflections in passing lanes, getting out in transition and running. And again, a really good passer. So that's extremely dangerous, what he can do defensively, turning that into offense. Really the only concern for me, well, I guess there's two. He had enough lapses defensively after I just explained how good he was on defense, but he had blow-by issues, right? Like guys he'd get caught on his heels. He wouldn't get down into a crouch. Times it looked like early career Andrew Wiggins where he just isn't getting into the crouch, isn't quite ready, and now he's on his heels and he's trying to recover, and he can sometimes because of the length and the athleticism. But in my opinion, that's something that you can see this from Anthony Edwards, actually. Go back and watch Ant at Georgia, and it was either because he was bored, because he was really good and his team wasn't, or because he was shouldering so much of the offensive load, which basically meant all of it at the University of Georgia, that the defense wasn't a priority, or he just couldn't commit that much of his energy to defense. Perhaps we see that a little bit with Jalen Williams being by far the best player at Santa Clara. In the NBA, the Timberwolves coaching staff could say, hey, we're going to take the load off offensively. You're not our primary creator. You're playing off the ball. You're a bench guy, whatever. You must lock in on D. We drafted you because you've got a 7'2" wingspan and you're really good and disruptive both on and off the ball. You just got to lock in. And if they can eliminate the blow-bys, you're talking about somebody that legit, I think, could have all defensive potential, like a shorter but still long version of Jaden McDaniels who can guard 1 through 3. And of course, Jaden can guard like 2 through 5 or 2 through 4. I mean, imagine him on the same team as Jaden McDaniels. It's crazy. My only other concern is on offense, in non-pick and roll type situations, he does look a little awkward with the ball in his hands. As much as he can create for others, and he's so good getting downhill on dribble handoff or pick and roll action, if he's just straight up has the ball on the open floor, he's not going to score one-on-one. He's not going to score in isolation. I think awkward's the best way to describe it. It actually reminds me a little bit of Jaden McDaniels as a rookie. Remember how there would be like one possession a game where Jaden would get the ball and he'd dribble into a contested mid-range jumper, and he'd just kind of get stuck in no man's land? It feels like that could happen with Jalen Williams as well. Now, I mean, he wouldn't have to do that, right? He's not going to be a one-on-one isolation scorer for the Timberwolves because the Timberwolves have Anthony Edwards and they have Karl-Anthony Towns and they have other guys who can get offense. Jalen Williams would be a complementary player. The best way to put it for me is he's got a fascinating blend of length, shooting, and playmaking. The help defense, the on-ball defense, as long as he can lock in. If he continues to improve one-on-one and can get rid of the blow-bys, he would be a perfect bench creator for the Timberwolves. I mean, if they trade D'Angelo Russell, like say Pat Bev or even Jordan McLaughlin starts, or they find another starting guard, Jalen Williams could be like a 2-guard off the bench that could also initiate offense. Think of like when Jalen Noel did that for stretches this year, but obviously much better defensively than Jalen Noel, and I would say a higher upside for that reason. But he'd be kind of a bench combo guard, bench creator that could also score. And remember, 48% on catch and shoot threes this year. So he could play off the ball as a starter eventually too. I mean, maybe not from day one, given his experience level, playing 3 years at a small school, and still working on some of the polish to his both ends of the floor. But he could be a catch and shoot guy from day one. And I think that's valuable. I really like him as a prospect. And I bet the Timberwolves do, given the combination, the tantalizing combination of length and athleticism, shooting ability, all that stuff. It's really fascinating. And I really like Jalen Williams as a prospect, and I'd have him higher on my board than a lot of these other mock drafts and big boards do. All right, one more player to talk about today. We will get to number 19, of course, where the Timberwolves will be drafting this year. Number 19 on my big board is coming up next. All right, wrapping up the show today with number 19 on the big board. Let's talk about Dalen Terry, combo guard out of Arizona, 6'7", 7-foot wingspan. Good size for a combo guard, right? 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, extremely long, a disruptive defender. We just got done talking about one disruptive defender in Jalen Williams. Dalen Terry is another example of that. He's obviously a little bit taller. The wingspan is not quite as big, and he is more of a combo guard. Jalen Williams, I talked about playing combo guard. I mean, he's really a wing, right? He's going to play the 3, but can create as a combo guard type player. Dalen Terry's more of a legitimate combo guard, even though he's bigger than Jalen Williams, but the skill set as a passer is pretty unmatched. I mean, there's only a couple other guys in this draft. I would say he's probably top 3 or 4 passers of the ball in this draft, if not top 2 or 3. Extremely long. He's a disruptive defender. We'll talk about that end of the floor first. He gets a ton of steals, which then turns defense into offense, something the Wolves love to do, right? The Wolves get how much of the Wolves offense this year, we talked about this throughout the season, was predicated on getting turnovers, the high turnover rate defensively, getting out on the open floor, and getting easy buckets. The half-court offense was brutal for the Timberwolves early this season, and it was the defense and the turnovers generated and the points off of those turnovers that kept the Wolves afloat offensively early in the season. It's one of the reasons why they struggled in the playoffs in the games they didn't generate a ton of turnovers, is the half-court offense wasn't up to snuff, and they weren't getting enough turnovers defensively. Dalen Terry fits the mold of be disruptive, be long, get in passing lanes, turn defense into offense. Dalen Terry does that. He's also a very physical defender. He can fight through screens, something Timberwolves fans have not seen a lot of from their guards. Now, we saw a lot more of it this year. To D'Angelo Russell's credit, he improved in that regard. Jordan McLaughlin does his best, although he's not quite strong enough or big enough in a lot of cases. Patrick Beverley's really good at it. Anthony Edwards is improved. Jaden McDaniels is improved. But getting skinny and fighting through screens, being physical enough but not overly physical to get through screens, he really is a nightmare matchup for smaller guards. And again, he's a combo guard, so he's likely playing the two, could get cross-matched onto ones pretty frequently, and he can guard ones. Dalen Terry can do that. Even at 6'7", the 7-foot wingspan, the lateral quickness is good enough that he can be that nightmare defensive matchup for smaller guards. On offense, he gets into transition a lot because he's generating so many steals himself. He's fantastic in transition, a really strong decision maker, a very, very good passer, great at hit-aheads. You watch any highlight reel of Arizona basketball, and you're going to see hit-aheads to rim runs all the time. Rim runs all the time. Dalen Terry was hitting rim runners. Think about that in the Wolves' offense. Think about the other thing he does really well is getting downhill on dribble handoff or pick and roll action and throwing lobs at full speed. Think about him throwing lobs at full speed to Jaden McDaniels, to Jared Vanderbilt, to Anthony Edwards, to these guys that are crashing down from the baseline. And Dalen Terry has the vision to see those cutters, to see those guys in the dunker spot, to throw those lobs. And again, in the open floor, rim runs, it's something Karl-Anthony Towns he really needs to get better at, is getting back in transition on offense and sniffing out, whether it's getting a seal at the front of the rim or simply just getting an open rim run. Towns isn't the athletic rim running big necessarily. It's something he can do and needs to do more of. But think of it with some of the other athletes on the team. I mean, Jared Vanderbilt, that's how he's going to get a couple buckets a game if Dalen Terry has the ball in his hands. The athleticism and length of Vando, that's a perfect match there for Dalen Terry to get the ball in his hands. He's an okay shooter. I mean, he was 36% on three-pointers this year at Arizona. It was relatively low volume, and he was much better the last dozen or so games. I think he was well over 40%. So the shot improved as the year went on. The mechanics isn't great, or I should say the mechanics aren't great, but they're fine. I mean, they're good enough. And again, that doesn't matter as much if the shot is going in. 36% on three-pointers on low volume, but improved as the season went on. Off the ball, he is a good cutter and a very good finisher in the paint, and he's a combo guard. He's not going to be the starting point guard for the Timberwolves, maybe eventually, but he's going to be more of likely a bench creator, off-ball type guy. So it's important that he's a good cutter. It's important he can finish at the rim because he's going to be in a couple of, there's possibility he's running the offense or he's playing off the ball. There's different options here, and he has to be able to do multiple things, and I think he can. My only real concern with him, maybe shooting consistency because the volume wasn't there and doesn't score from the mid-range. So I talked about his catch and shoot three-point ability and his ability to score at the rim. Didn't do much in between. So all the stuff that D'Lo is really good at, the hard stuff, right? The mid-range jumpers, the pull-ups, the contested shots, the floaters, he doesn't really do that. And so there's some question about how good his touch is. Now he's good in the paint and good from three, but what does that look like if teams dare him, if they play drop coverage and dare him to do something in the mid-range? They play drop, they try and take away the lob, they try and, kind of pen him in the middle of the floor. That could be a concern. It's also something that could be developed. He's a good enough three-point shooter and good enough at the rim. There's reason to believe he could improve there. I think the only other concern is his strength, his build, right? He's lanky. He needs to get stronger at the NBA level. Again, physical getting through screens in college. Can he do that? Can his body stand the wear and tear at the NBA level? Is he just going to get bounced around? That's a little bit of a concern. There's a reason why he's likely to be on the board. A lot of mocks have him lower than I do, by the way. A lot of he very likely could fall into the 20s, but I like him as a prospect. The reason I have him below like Jalen Williams, I think Jalen Williams has more polish, and that's why I have Jalen Williams a spot ahead of Dalen Terry. But Dalen Terry has enough ability as an upside, or enough ability, I should say, as a shooter and as a defender and a playmaker, that even if he's a little bit raw, you could plug him into the rotation and he could play from day one for the Wolves and have an impact. You could get away with playing him, but the upside is also very tremendous in my mind when it comes to Dalen Terry. Put simply, I think he should be able to play off the ball or run point, which is attractive at the size of 6'7" with 7-foot wingspan. He's another bench creator option for Minnesota. And he could eventually start at point guard, a couple, 3 years down the road, depending on where that position goes for the Wolves. Chris Finch likes to play long athletes. He likes to have flexibility with positions. Dalen Terry brings that, the length plus the defensive ability, the instincts, and the passing ability, which is so fantastic in the open floor and in pick and roll game, is very intriguing. And I really like Dalen Terry as a prospect. All right. Next week, we're going to hit three more players, probably on Monday's show, and then I'm going to kind of rerun through the big board much more quickly with some edits. We'll talk about rumors. The Wolves have had a ton of guys in for draft workouts, both players towards the middle of the draft, and then also a bunch of guys that would be late first round, second rounders. Of course, the Wolves have 3 second round picks. They also have the ability to trade back from 19 if they wanted to, or trade up from their picks in the 40s. All possibilities. No major draft rumors related to the Wolves. Of course, recently we saw both JaMychal Green and Christian Wood traded, a couple of Western Conference power forwards, essentially. Both players that would fit the Wolves extremely well. JaMychal Green, somebody we know the Wolves have pursued in the past. So the trade market is definitely, we see this week before the draft is when things start to happen. The Wolves in the past have made some trades leading into the draft, of course, under previous regimes. Entirely possible that something else goes down here as we get closer to draft night. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that and be with you if anything breaks here in the coming days. Otherwise, we'll be back on Monday. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Wolves podcast. And again, thank you for making us your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as Apple, Google, Spotify, and Odyssey. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And a reminder about the NBA mock draft that is in the process of rolling out. The first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. That post is up. Just search for the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. You'll find it. Again, episode 1's out. Episode 2, I believe, comes out today on Friday. And then next week, you'll find the episode with yours truly picking for the Wolves. You'll get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway now. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen here today. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.